Hello, my name is Lola Adebanji, and I'm joined today by Emily Watson, the Senior Director of Payments and Global Banking at Flywire. Emily, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Lola. Thanks for having me.
Great. Emily, maybe if we start off, if you could please give us a brief background about Flywire and your role at the company.
Yeah, sure. So Flywire is a high growth verticalized payments software solution company. So what that really means is what do we do? So we provide software solutions for companies in very specific verticals who have really complex payment needs. So what we found over time is that traditional payment solutions may not be enough to solve the actual problems that a lot of our clients are facing. So we work primarily in three verticals, although we are always expanding, but primarily in the education space, which is actually where we got our start. Several years ago, our founder was trying to attend MIT, and he was a Spanish student, had some troubles with his payment experience, and entrepreneurial spirit that he was, decided to go off and start this company. It's since evolved. We also serve clients in the healthcare space. So particularly here in the United States, hospital bills can be unwieldy to manage, not just being kind of large to manage, but also numerous and multiple. So sometimes you'll find you get bills for a number of different things. So we provide software solutions, again, with the payment experience embedded in that experience to provide services to hospitals and healthcare providers, and then also the patients who are trying to make these payments. And then third, we have a travel vertical, which primarily serves tour operators, luxury travel groups who are helping their clientele take wonderful trips around the world. So think of someone who wants to take a skiing trip to the Alps, but our clients are the ones who are providing a bundled service of flights and the hotel room stays and ski lodge and ski passes, equipment rental, right? All of that in one bundled package. We help facilitate that transaction. They're primarily cross borders as well. And so we provide all of those services, but on top of a proprietary payments infrastructure that we maintain with our global banking partners around the world that's only for use by our own clients.
Great, thanks very much for that. And it's very interesting that you've taken a vertical route, right, as a payments company, focusing on specific verticals. Help us understand what value that approach brings to your clients versus being, a jack of all trades, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we found, and I've actually seen a lot of this in the past couple of months, been spending a lot more time speaking directly with our clients to try to find different ways that we can help them with their problems. But what you find is a lot of these institutions have really complex payment processes, and these are high value transactions as well, right? So we don't deal primarily in the the e-commerce size $100 payment that you might make at for a sweater if you're buying a really nice sweater, or things of that nature. We deal with tuition payments, hospital bills, these chunky big travel payments. And so each of these institutions we deal with are tremendously complex in themselves as well, right? They have multiple different touch points. It's not as simple as trying to find one vendor and integrate with that platform and be able to process payments. So what we do is we embed ourselves in the client's experience. We help with issuing invoices. We help with matching those invoices as well. And it requires us to be a little bit more ingrained in their actual processes and understanding exactly how they use the platform and exactly how they need to interact with payments, whether they be domestic payments, installment payments, or really challenging sometimes cross-border payments as well.
Mm-hmm. Great, no thanks. And one question I had, just given the opportunity, the fact that you are in these very specific verticals and have deep insights into these areas, how are these verticals and how is education, how is travel, how is healthcare being impacted by the pandemic? And what sort of payment themes are you seeing emerging across these verticals?
Yeah, so obviously it's been kind of tough times for everyone all around. I know, at the individual level as well as at an institutional level. So we've seen a number of different trends across all our clients, but fortunately our clients are quite resilient. And so we're happy to be able to help them through this process. So in the education space, the first thing we saw was, a large delay in issuing tuition bills. So for us, typically our education, our peak cycle is, as our friends at Citi are well aware as well, because that's when a lot of, our volumes spike in that sector because of tuition billing, is typically, late July through August. And this year we actually saw that kind of more happen from late August through September. So a lot of schools, there was a lot of uncertainty about whether schools would be going back, and especially, at least in the United States anyway. I think every country has its own trajectory right now and how they're managing these things. But in the United States, which is where a lot of our clients are located, we're struggling with that reality, right, of not knowing if they'd be on campus in the fall, and then trying to determine what their new processes might be very quickly to capture those payments from their students, and then contingency planning, right, if they had to send them back home. Additionally, the shift to online learning as well. So we've had a number of clients who might have brought students back to campus and then suffered an outbreak and might have had to move, education online. On top of that, a lot of them have international students, right? So a lot of our business, like I mentioned, how we started cross-border tuition payments, right? So there's been some challenges as well there, as particularly in the United States, with a potential visa ban, which fortunately ended up working out just fine for us, but caused a lot of uncertainty and a lot of confusion. So what we've been doing is just trying to support our clients with, whether it is thought pieces of just best practices and advice on how to navigate this era, whether it be support in, mass refunds, right? So if we have to send money back to a lot of these countries, helping them out with those processes as well. Then in the healthcare space, it hasn't really actually been much of a change. In the United States, you still have to process these medical bills, but so that business has actually been quite steady. And earlier this year, we acquired a company called Simply, and have, been integrating with them. So we've seen a lot of growth in that sector, which has been really encouraging for us. So that's the nice thing about having a verticalized client base, is that, every client operates a little bit differently. So you see different impacts when something like COVID-19 occurs. And then the travel space, of course, there have been some challenges there. People are not traveling right now, at least here in the States, but we are starting to see pickup, across other areas of the world, depending on what their local policies are. And we're also seeing that our clients are still taking bookings, right? So people are still intending to travel. We're actually still seeing a lot of bookings come in for, fall and winter of this year. And we're also seeing people, just rather than, cancel and refund their transactions, try to reschedule their trip. So for me, for example, I was supposed to go to Greece this August, coming from the United States, had to reschedule that trip, of course, because Americans are not currently traveling outside of the country to many places. And so I just rebooked, right? So rather than asking for a refund for the villa, I just said, can you just move it to next year? Because I do still want to travel, very much so. So we're supporting our clients by, again, just providing advisory support, and then assisting them when they have, operational needs. And to the other point of your question of, what are we seeing as kind of trends off the back of kind of some of those challenges and changes in the industries, is definitely a lot of our clients have approached us about, trying to offer more and more digitalized solutions. I'm hoping this is finally the death of the check. Maybe that is optimistic.
In the US, at least.
Yeah, the US and Canada is still clinging onto it as well. So, our clients are, have been sending checks oftentimes. If they're sending a refund, sometimes it's a US dollar check cross borders, which is just, incredibly challenging, as you can imagine, to manage. So, we're helping them digitize those refunds to send, wires cross border, ACH payments cross border, instead of sending checks. So I think, that's one of the things that we're seeing our clients migrate to.
No, that's great. And I guess to that point around changing payment behaviors, right? You talked about the US and migration away from checks. Are you seeing any other sort of interesting changing in behaviors, either of the payers to your clients or your clients themselves, and how they think about their payment models?
Yeah, so I think our payers are largely operating the same way they always have. Continuing to leverage, Flywire offers a number of different payment options for the payers. So whether it could be bank transfer or alternate payment methods such as PayPal or Alipay or credit cards. So we haven't really seen much of a change there. Majority of our volume is still coming in over bank rails, and second to that is card volume. On the client side, there are some considerations on, how quickly, obviously, they could receive funds is key. The reducing kind of DSO and trying to make sure that they have access to working capital is critical for them. And so I think those are things that we'll continue to see, our clients need in this current environment.
One thing I had asked at the beginning that we didn't get to was your role at Flywire. Can you tell us a little bit more about your role? Because I think you used an interesting kind of concept once of being a translation layer. So if you can tell us more about your specific role there, that would be great.
Yeah, of course. I just jumped right into it. I got so excited talking about Flywire. So I've been at Flywire for almost 2 years now, and was hired into the organization to focus on managing our global banking relationships. So as I mentioned at the beginning, we operate a proprietary network of banks all over the world, rather than working through an aggregator to offer payment services to our clients. We find that that helps us reduce cost and also improve service. And so my role, is kind of standing between our banking relationships and, the nimble fintech kind of startup mentality when we're creating software solutions and trying to move fast and offer awesome payment options to our clients. I often do serve as you mentioned, that translation layer. So our banking partners do speak sometimes in different language than we do as a software company, right? Payments company, but offering particularly nuanced software solutions. So oftentimes I find myself kind of standing in between or in the middle of a lot of different conversations. On the banking side, of course, we talking about things like Swift or cash management processes and practices, regulations, right, are a huge consideration for us, and we often do speak directly with regulators as well. But then on the Flywire side, I'm talking about, everyone's talking about APIs these days, but it's focusing on how do we make this the most elegant solution possible, and it's important, I think, in this type of role to have the empathy to understand that everyone's trying to achieve the same goal at the end of the day. They're just speaking very different languages and trying to get there. And so that's a large part of my time is spent having those conversations and trying to get to the truth of what everyone's trying to achieve.
It's great. It's bringing two completely different languages together, which I'm sure is hugely valuable. And I guess to that point on really having that layer of the banking partnerships that you work with to help kind of enable and develop the Flywire payment network. I'm curious to get your thoughts on those rails, essentially, those rails that are helping, that you are leveraging as an organization to really power the solutions that you then onward develop to your clients. How do you see those rails evolving, right? Are you seeing developments in the banking landscape, financial landscape that's helping further that? Do you think that the rails going forward, especially as we come out of the pandemic, are going to look very different? I'm curious to get your thoughts on what are the changes we're likely to see in terms of payment rails and bank rails that will be relevant as we go forward in the current environment that we're in?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I'll take it as a two-part. So the first is trends we were seeing before the pandemic hit, and then trends that I think are going to accelerate once we get out of all of this. So before the pandemic hit and continuing through now, we're seeing kind of a rise in instant payment networks around the world, and how companies like myself, like Flywire, are able to leverage those and interact with those to provide new services to our clients. So you think of request to pay in the UK, in the US as well. We've had a number of conversations in both of those markets, and I think those schemes are very useful for our clients to, like I said, accelerate how quickly they can receive their funds, as well as for providers like us, right? Because those funds are immediate, they are instant, they're irrevocable when we receive them. It makes our lives a lot easier when we're processing payments and trying to offer these cool services to our clients. So the improvements of the infrastructure in terms of payment rails and the move to real-time payments has been a trend that I think we were seeing before the pandemic and we'll continue to see after, perhaps even with an accelerated focus, I would hope. And then
I hope so
secondly,
too.
yeah, I'm sure in your role, I can imagine that as well. Um, and so secondly, then post-pandemic, I think some of the things we've really had to take a good hard look in the mirror as a payments industry and I think around how much we're still doing manually, and how much is still dependent on a physical location. So as a younger company, Flywire definitely benefits from the fact that, you know, we didn't have to send anyone into offices during the pandemic. So all of our employees were able to work 100% remote day one, when our offices were forced to be closed. I think the first one was actually out in our Shanghai office, right? Because I think they were the first to feel the impact. So we were able to operate 100% online, all of our operations staff, all of our processes, which is definitely a luxury that younger companies can have, especially if they're focusing more on, you know, digital payments. But I think hopefully what we will see is a shift where more companies realize that that has to be the norm instead of a luxury. So, you know, moving back office, operations all entirely online to the extent that we can. Of course, that's still dependent on what we were mentioning before, checks going away. I'll plug that again. But you know, understanding that those things are important to business continuity, and which I think we all recognized before, but I don't think we ever could have expected that we would have had to deal with that business continuity plan for such a prolonged period of time, right? And I think it must be, yeah, it must be impacting, you know, the quality of work for a lot of people. So I'm hoping that we see a shift towards being able to operate entirely online for all operational processes. And the other thing, again, like I said, I'm hoping that we do see another death blow to paper checks. So like I mentioned before, you know, our clients are starting to move away from them. So I'm hoping that those two things can go hand in hand post-pandemic, or at least over the years that to come post-pandemic. I'm a realist.
Over the years, definitely, definitely. And I'm glad you picked up on kind of the work aspect, because I think I'd like to end on having a little bit of a think around the future of work, right? Most of us have been working from home or working remotely for 5 months. Some companies even plan on doing this much longer. Some are starting to open up slowly. I'd love to get your perspectives on, as we kind of evolve, as we emerge out of this, hopefully, what on the future of work, and get your thoughts on how do you think, or how do you hope the future of work will evolve post-pandemic?
Yes. So I've been fortunate in that, fortunate or unfortunate, but I've been working from home for 2 years now. So Flywire is a very flexible work policy. I'm based in New York. The company is headquartered in Boston. Fortunately, they're also flexible enough that I do travel to Boston quite often. So I do get that social interaction that I think we all crave and are particularly craving right now. But it has been, you know, a real joy for me to see a lot of colleagues get to experience some of the benefits of being able to work from home full time, right? So more time with your families, hopefully healthier lifestyles, you know, being able to have some time to carve out to exercise or cook dinner. I know I'm probably not taking advantage of that free time as well as I wish I was right now, but you know, the time is there in a way that it wasn't before, because we had to do 1 or 2 hour commutes. And I think the quality of life for a lot of people has improved in that aspect, even though holistically we know that there are a lot of other challenges that come with being stuck at home. So I think that balance is key, right? So being able to provide employees with the flexibility of working from home and taking advantage of all that has to offer, but also still being able to maintain, you know, that social aspect of an office longer term, right? So if I'm talking post-pandemic, what I would love to see is that balance, right? The ability to flexibly work from home 2 or 3 days a week as a norm, right? To be able to attend doctor's appointments in the morning, right before you start work, or you know, those of us who are on calls from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. Be able to be a little bit more flexible with how we spend our time in between those calls. I hope we start to see that. I hope we start to see, you know, maybe even a shift to like satellite offices as opposed to maybe, you know, big corporate headquarters. So people do have that flexibility and still have that access to their peers in all the cities and places that they work around the world. So I'm optimistic. It seems like a lot of companies are headed in that direction, or at the very least have been forced to appreciate that their employees are still working even though they're at home. And that's where I hope this goes longer term.
No, that's great. Thanks, Emily. And it's interesting to think that what was previously the norm in terms of, commuting to the office every single day, and how that shift has been able to happen. And it'll be interesting to see how, as you say, that evolves going forward, and what new strategies companies think about employing in enabling that kind of balance for employees as well. So thank you so much for that, Emily. And thank you for all the great insights you shared with us today in terms of Flywire, what you're up to there, your great translation role. I really love that quote, the way you positioned it, and things to look forward to in terms of what's coming down the track from a payments landscape perspective. And I really hope your opportunity to get to Greece, fingers crossed, everything being equal, comes back again next summer. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you everyone for joining us today.